So I'm going to talk Edya and you through the rebalance sequence, and I'm going to do it at a little bit of a quicker pace. So I hope that you drank a little bit of water. Both Edya and I are hydrated now. So I'm going to have you guys lie on your back with your palms faced up and your arms and legs extended. You remember this position is the rest assess, and it's the position that you'll return to at the beginning and end of every sequence to identify if you're making changes and also to create a baseline of where you are right now. So I want you to use your body sense and begin to scan your masses and spaces. You'll remember masses are the areas of your body touching the floor, spaces are the areas off the ground. There's three areas that stuck stress loves to accumulate in these masses and spaces: the shoulder girdle, the diaphragm, and the pelvis. So I want you to use your body sense, and let's begin in the upper body and see if you've got stuck stress living in your shoulder girdle. So remember, ideally, if you had no stuck stress in your shoulder girdle, your head would weight right behind the bridge of your nose, your arms would be evenly weighted masses on the ground, and in your upper body, if you had no stuck stress in your shoulder girdle, the mid-rib wall below the bra line, around the bra line, would be the heaviest region of the torso. However, you might be noticing that most or all of your upper back weight is actually resting against your shoulder girdle. You might even feel the edges of the shoulder blades digging into the ground. You might notice one arm is more offset than the other. You can also take a moment to do the movement assessment called the neck turn assess and turn your head right and left. Remember, if you feel like you've got limited range or pain as you turn your head, or you feel like your shoulders move around, that's a sign of stuck stress in the shoulder girdle as well. Come back to a central point, take a nice focused breath, and draw your awareness and your body sense into the middle of the torso. Remember, if the diaphragm is full of stuck stress, it's going to alter the shape and size of your low back curve. So instead of feeling a nice, small, distinctive space between the navel and the top of the pelvis, you might be noticing that the curve of your back starts at your pelvis and ends at your shoulder girdle. Remember, if you need to cheat with touch, you could always touch the navel to the fingertip to the navel and notice if you've got the curve feeling higher or lower than that point. Then bring your arm back down to the ground. Draw your awareness and body sense down to the lower body. Remember, if you had no stuck stress in your pelvis, you'd be feeling two evenly weighted butt cheeks on the ground, but you might be noticing your tailbone is more weighted to the floor than butt cheeks. That's a sign of stuck stress. Also in your legs, ideally the back of the thighs are masses. Notice if the back of the thighs feel off the ground on one or both sides. That's another common imbalance caused by stuck stress in the pelvis. Ideally the knees are spaces, off the ground evenly. Calves are ideally masses weighted to the ground. Ankles are spaces. Ideally the outer ankle bones do not touch the floor. And finally the heels are masses. And if you had no stuck stress in the pelvis, the toes would point towards where the ceiling meets the walls, like a letter V, northeast, northwest. But again, in the lower body, if you're feeling like your tailbone's weighted to the ground, back of the thighs are off the floor, and your feet feel more like they're pointing southeast, west, due south, or east and west, or some blend of that in between, you've identified stuck stress in the pelvis. So remember, there are four common imbalances that many of us possess that are left unaddressed, and these are the four that end up accumulating most of the stress in the spine that can not only damage the spine itself, but also alter the core reflex and break down our own core stability. So remember, if you're feeling like all your upper back weight's on your shoulder blades, if your mid-back is arched off the floor, if your tailbone is weighted to the ground more than your butt cheeks, or the back of the thighs are off the floor, you have identified stuck stress living in your body that could be causing you pain over time. So the other thing we can do is assess our autopilot, divide ourselves into a left and a right half, and notice if we feel balanced from left to right, or if we're failing autopilot inefficiency, feeling like one leg is longer or one side of the body feels more weighted than the other. Once you've identified any of these imbalances, take a nice focused breath, and when you're ready, turn yourself on your side, come on up to sitting, and at your own pace, I want you guys to lie back on your roller. And remember, once you get up onto the roller, knees are bent, touch the top of your head, and just 100% ensure that you are on the roller. Hands onto the ground, and you're going to begin doing gentle rocking, allowing your masses to tip right and left. Now remember, don't move too fast through this motion. Just take your time and really allow the autopilot to go into action to support, protect, and stabilize you on the unstable surface while you're doing this motion. And remember that by doing gentle rocking is a reconnect technique. It's a way to help your autopilot reacquire its connection to your center of gravity, and it also gives the autopilot time to adapt to the pressure along the spine. Come back to a center point, place your hands on the front of your pelvis, and let's try your tuck and tilt. So remember, the tuck is to allow the low back to travel toward the roller, and then the tilt is to land the sacrum back onto the top of the roller. Remember, when you tuck, make sure that you're not pushing into your feet, squeezing your butt cheeks, or lifting your hips. And when you tilt, make sure that you're not moving your ribs. And remember, if you feel like your ribs are coming with you on the tilt, just place your hands on your ribs instead and continue to tuck and tilt. And see if you focus on where you want to stay stable as opposed to where you're moving, if you can actually acquire more differentiated control and help your autopilot reconnect to your center of gravity. So remember, tucking, elongating the low back, tilting, increasing the curve, come somewhere back to the middle, that's your neutral pelvis. And now let's try the 3D breath breakdown. You're going to place one hand on your chest, one hand on your abdomen, and I want you to begin taking a few focused breaths from a midline up to the ceiling and down to the roller in 2 directions. From a midline down to the roller and up to the ceiling in equal timing. Now remember, these breaths don't have to be the fullest breaths you can take. It's just your act of thinking about breathing that alters diaphragmatic communication and can help to rebalance the autopilot. On your next breath, at your own pace, you're going to place your hands on the sides of your ribs. And you're going to take 4 or 5 focused breaths into the sides of your body, breathing with into the diaphragm. So remember, as you're taking the breaths, just allow your own conscious awareness to just draw attention to where and how you are breathing. And this is how you alter diaphragmatic control and again, alter how your brain and diaphragm communicate. On your next breath, bring one hand over your sternum or collarbones and one hand down onto the front of the pelvis or your pubis bone. And now breathe length into the torso, breathing from the midline up to the ceiling, up to the collarbones and down to the pelvis in equal timing. Breathing length into the torso. Now you might notice as you're doing these focused breaths that your body is subtly shifting or rocking on the roller. And if you're noticing that, again, don't stop it from happening. That is what happens when you stimulate the diaphragm. You're actually altering the oscillation and movement of the diaphragmatic control, which can further enhance the autopilot to reacquire its connection to the center of gravity. On your next breath, place both hands on your abdomen, and I want you to take 2 nice 6-sided breaths, just natural inhalations, and then again, let your natural exhale feel and follow it. And then after you take 2 breaths, I want you guys to decide on which firm exhalation you're going to make, an SE, an HA, or an SH sound, you pick. So whichever sound helps you to really sense the hugging or gathering in the torso. Do that 2 or 3 times. And what you want to feel is that natural contraction, that cylindrical inward gathering, like you're giving your organs a little hug. You're not bearing down or pushing out, it's just a nice hugging. Once you think you have that connection, this time take a nice 6-sided breath, but on your exhale, don't force exhalation. Let your natural exhale initiate the breath, but then in the middle of it, feel and follow the contraction. And see if you can sense that you can actually consciously engage that reflex. And just do that 3 or 4 times. On your inhale, let it all go. And then let your natural exhale initiate the breath, but then feel and follow it and see if you can find the contraction. That's called finding your core, and in all of the sequence, anytime Edya says find your core, remember you could always make your sound or just draw your attention to that gentle hugging and gathering in your torso. When you're ready, straighten out your hands onto the ground, straighten out one of your legs and slide on off the roller, and let's reassess to see if you've decreased some of the accumulated stress along your spine and if you have helped your autopilot reacquire its connection to your center of gravity. So again, remember, identify your masses and spaces. I pointed out 4 common imbalances. I said if all of your upper back weight feels like it's against your shoulder girdle, notice if your ribs have a little bit more width and weight to them. Notice if the curve of your low back is more like a low back curve instead of a mid-back curve, showing a release or a reduction of stuck stress in your diaphragm. Notice in your legs if we've reduced any stuck stress in the pelvis, if your butt cheeks are more on the ground than your tailbone, or the back of the thighs are more weighted to the ground. Also notice if your leg position has changed. You can also divide yourself into a left and a right half and notice if you've balanced out the autopilot, if it has more efficiency and connection to the center of gravity, if you're feeling more balanced from left to right. And finally, turn your head right and left. And even though we haven't done the neck release sequence or done anything to your neck, notice if by stimulating the core, if you've actually improved your own ability to turn your head. That would be what we call the indirect before direct approach, where we've actually improved your neck's turn ability without touching the neck at all. So when you're ready, bend your knees, turn yourself on your side, and come up to sitting. So now you've heard the sequence done by both Edya and I, and what I want you listening to are the nuances and the differences between two people teaching the exact same thing, and all of the similar threads and the similar things, and also the uniqueness of the metaphors that Edya will teach you. So ideally, over time, you guys will pick up things from how I say it and the things that you hear in the recordings and the audio files as well as the video files to start coming up with what works for you so that you can share this with other people as well. Awesome.